One of the most famous stories in the last 500 years was the story about King Duncan of Scotland. Okay, I say it's really famous, and you're all thinking, I don't even know who King Duncan is, so he's obviously not that famous. No. Good try, though. That was close. Yeah. It's got to be Braveheart, right? Jace is talking. It's got to be about it. All right, so actually it's not really about King Duncan so much. It's about this brave Scottish general, and these three witches come to him, and they tell this Scottish general that he is going to be the new king of Scotland. And then he takes it upon himself to move in and make sure that he gets that job. He kills the king. He takes the throne. He is this famous general. You guys know who he is? Macbeth. I heard one person say that. Was that my son? Nice job. Okay, someone had to read Macbeth probably in the last year, right? Yeah, this is Macbeth. All right, so there's this famous line in here, and it's a story about the psychology and the physiology, what it does to him as he's taken power. And it's a fantastic, fantastic play. Tragedy, of course. But Macduff and Malcolm are bemoaning the fate of Scotland now with this new king on the throne. And they're miserable. The circumstances are as horrible as they can possibly be. And they say this: each new morn, new widows howl. New orphans cry. New sorrows strike heaven on the face. You hear that? I just love the way those words are put together. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven on the face. That is, things are horrible. Every new morning, there's new horrors to be seen here. Life, well, they're not pleased with it. Maybe you're not quite as cultured as I pretend to be in knowing Macbeth. Like, I don't remember much about Macbeth. I just did the research beforehand, right? Maybe you're thinking more in the line of Mel Brooks, equally famous, right? His words, life stinks. Right? They're saying the same thing here. Life stinks. And we all feel this sometimes. We understand life sometimes beats us down, right? We're hurting. The people in this book, Hebrews, that we're going through, they're feeling this too. They're feeling this weight on them. Their lives are horrible. They're desperately trying to cling to Jesus, but almost certainly wondering whether this is even a good idea anymore. Like, is this what we want? Because things are not working out for us. Life stinks, and nothing seems to be getting better. And they know the stories of the old. They know these ancient stories of the faith where God came through for his people, but he's not coming through for them. They know about Abraham and Moses and David, how God rescued them out of these horrible places. He cared for them. Why isn't he moving now? And it's the same question that all of us ask. That's why I love Scripture. Because it's telling us these stories that apply very specifically to our life. The author of Hebrews is writing to them in their hurt, in their circumstances, to remind them of the reality of this, that they have an anchor for their soul. They have an anchor for their soul. But they're wondering that, right? They're hurt. Will he hold on to us? Will he keep hold? And so he tells them this story. This is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. I'm going to read, it's a rather long passage for what we've been dealing with lately, but I want to read the whole thing, and I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about this in different forms. It says this: by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so, from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They didn't receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they're looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were looking for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Here's the author of Hebrews, right? They're going through this life stinks. They're remembering back to the past. They're remembering all these great stories. And he's saying, I'm not sure you're remembering these stories perfectly clear, right? It wasn't always easy for David. It wasn't always easy for Abraham. It wasn't always easy for Moses. They didn't just like, okay, we just have faith. Everything's nice and easy. That's not the way it was. We're missing this vital fact that they struggled. That's why the first two verses of the first two words of this and of every single section is this: by faith. Right? They're going through hard things. They had to have faith. They're not superheroes. God didn't always just pull them right through. Like, oh, you're having a little bit of trouble? Okay, I'll just pull you right through. They had to have faith in the midst of crazy circumstances. Abraham has to get up and go somewhere that God didn't even tell him where it was. Just got to go. He had to trust that his son was coming even though he was too old to have a son. He didn't receive what was promised for a long time. You might argue that he never literally received the promise. So I wanted to show you a few things that came to me and came to other people, because you know what I'm always doing. I'm always just pulling other people's great ideas. So if they're great ideas here, they're probably somebody else's. But I wanted to show you three things. Okay, the first thing is this: don't trust circumstances. Probably not mind-blowing to you, right? Don't trust circumstances. You probably lived long enough to know that circumstances aren't always kind to you. They don't always work out the way that you're kind of hoping that they might. Look at Abraham. God sends him out, a place he doesn't know where he's going. It takes a long time for him to figure out where he's actually going. Years, lots of years. His dad dies in the journey. This is a long time. This isn't like, well, just go in a week or so. I'm going to make this all clear for you. We're talking about years he's wandering around. And I don't know what Abraham's thinking during this time, but you might be able to imagine, right? The story, though, seems to imply, at least this particular part of the story, seems to imply that he went. He understood it's not about the end location. I don't need to know where I'm going. It's not about that. I am going because God has taken me there. He understood, I'm not here to trust my circumstances. It doesn't matter what's going on in life. Abraham knew that's not what happens in life that matters. It's what you're bringing to life. What you bring to the circumstances, because the events of life cannot make or break the Christian. Now, I don't think you need to be a Christian to recognize this, right? I mean, this is not overly profound what I'm saying here. You don't need Hebrews 11 to get this. The Bible is just stating what everybody knows, I think, right? Circumstances don't always work out. Things don't always rationally end. They don't always end up the way you're hoping. Abraham knew that if he based his life, what he was doing in his life on his circumstances, circumstances would bite him in the behind, right? Because they always do, don't they? I mean, hasn't your experience taught you that? So this is not some Christian thing. Like if you're not a Christian here, you're going, yeah, this is obvious. We all know this. Circumstances bite us in the behind. They always do. If we say, my success depends on what I possess, what happens to me, the events of my life, my circumstances, then we're going to be pretty miserable. Yet, it seems like that is sometimes what we say, or what we act like, isn't it? Like these circumstances around us, we have to get them all in order. Things are going to work out as long as I have this career, if I get into this school, if I score this spouse, then life's going to be good. And because it's all about the circumstances, we spend much of our life in fear, anxious, because we're just hoping the right things work out, or we're trying to make sure we're straining to the future. We're hedging our bets. We're afraid to commit too many things. We don't want to agree to anything because we don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to end. If I don't know how it's going to end, then I don't want to jump in too much. I got to know the whole thing. And then your life already stinks, doesn't it? Because you're constantly concerned about whether this is the right move or this is the right move, and I got to make sure I do it. We live in this perpetual state of concern because you know what we all know. I hope circumstances will bite you in the behind. Because they always do. And Abraham realized, I think, it's not the circumstances that matter. They're probably not going to be that great. What matters is how I respond to God when God says go. That's what matters. My guess is there's people here that are wondering about this whole Christianity thing. Right? You're here and you're thinking about it. You don't know exactly what you think about this. Your friend invited you maybe, and you're trying to figure it out. And you're here already, so you think, I should probably think about it. I'm here. I'm not arrogant enough to just write it off, but I'm not sure. Those Christians, they think they have the capital T truth, so maybe they're a little bit arrogant, but I'm at least thinking about this. Right? I want to think this through. And what you're asking the question that a lot of people are asking. What you want to know about this Christianity thing is will it work for me? Is it going to work for me? Is it going to help me? Is it going to help me get the things that I need? Is it going to help me have the inner strength that I so desperately want? Is it going to help me with my goals, where I'm trying to get? Is it going to give me that new position where God now answers all of my prayers whenever I ask? Is that what I'm going to get out of this? Is it going to work? That's what we want to know about this. Right? We're pragmatic people. If I'm going to join up with this cause, is it going to work? So I'm going to answer that question for you right now. The answer is no. It's not going to work. Because it can't work if you come into it like that. That's not what it's designed for. It's not what Christianity is. If you come asking, is it going to change my circumstances? It's going to help me gain control over my circumstances, everything about the circumstances, then it's never going to work. What you need to be asking is it true? Is it real? Is he really there? Be honest. Ask yourself, is this the truth? Because if he's there, and if it's true, and if it's real, it doesn't matter whether it's practical or not. It doesn't matter whether it works the way you're hoping that it will work. Doesn't matter whether it makes you happy or whether all of your prayers get answered or whether you score that Disney princess wife. It doesn't matter. You have to come and you have to follow because it's true. What do you think about Jesus? Do you think Jesus had that perfect life, that his circumstances worked out perfectly for him all the time? I mean, most of you have heard about him. You know the stories about him. I mean, his life was pretty short, wasn't it? Pretty tortured. But all of you think, if he's real at all, you're thinking, Jesus is a great man. Short, circumstances work out, but you're thinking he's a great man. I want to be a great man, but he didn't get the circumstances. The circumstances didn't work out for him. Here he is. He's candidating to be president, right? That's basically what he's doing. He's going around making sure that people know that he's the guy. People are rallying around him. His enemies get him arrested on a trumped-up charge, even. They torture him. They kill him. And right before he dies, he asks God to save him. What does God do? Nope. He declines. No, I'm not going to do that. Life for Jesus did not go well. He wasn't great because he got all of his circumstances worked out, because everything lined up exactly according to the system of what we think the system should be. He was great. Jesus was great because he said, it's not up to me, it's up to you. It's not my will, it's your will. That's what I'm doing. He faced his life with integrity and with courage and obedience, and then in that he mastered life. And that's why we consider him to be great, even though circumstances weren't great for him. So my point here, this first point is, please forget about your circumstances. Get your mind off your circumstances. Because I guarantee you, if you haven't, maybe you young families are still like, life's pretty good. I'm pretty happy all the time. It's going to hit. It's going to hit, and it's going to mess up your whole worldview. Because circumstances always bite. Should I have you guys repeat that with me? Bite you in the behind. You don't have to repeat it because it's just weird, I know. But they do. And if we're spending all of our time trying to master the circumstances, we won't spend the time cultivating the kind of heart that Abraham had, who was ready when God said, I want you to go, and I'm not going to tell you where. And he said, okay, I'm going. That kind of heart is cultivated over time and love for God. Don't trust the circumstances. If I just had kids, friends, you might lose your kids. And I guarantee you, at some point in time, they're going to move out of the house. And they're going to be on their own, and you're going to hear the song in the background. What is that? Gets in the cradle and the silver spoon. You're going to be hearing that one, right? It's not going to work out the way that we'd hope. Oh, if I just had money, then the markets crash, things go bad, things go wrong. Don't trust the circumstances. But that's not enough. So that's my first point. Don't trust the circumstances. I don't think that's what Abraham's doing, but that's not enough, because what that does is that just turns you into a stoic, right? We live this life, life stinks, worrying about it's not going to get us anywhere. That's the stoic, like, we might as well just suck it up and make it work. Right? I mean, and that's where we end up if we're not following this particular path. I'm just not going to let it get to me. But Stoics don't become great men. They don't become great women, because they're just sucking it up. So number 2 is this. We go forward in hope. We go forward in hope. We're made for something more. We're made to go. We're made to move, to travel in hope, even not knowing where we're going. We're supposed to be going because God is with us. We do have a hope. We do kind of know where we're going, right? We might not know what the next move is, but we do kind of know where we're going. We're going with God. We're going to wherever God takes us. Where we're going in this world, we don't know, but we know our ultimate destination, and he's going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about that next week, week after even more. Because we are looking to this heaven, right? Abraham's looking ahead. He's not thinking about the country he left. He's not going back. Remember the Israelites, let's go back to Egypt. We got to go back to Egypt. No, he's saying, I'm going to go somewhere else. And all the greats of the past are looking for a better country, a heavenly country, a city with foundations. That's really next week. I really want to say a city with foundations. And I know some of you are like, okay, you're talking about heaven again. I get it, yeah, heaven, right? But those people who are constantly thinking about heaven, they're of no earthly good, right? It's that kind of a thing. Christians and their understanding, this pie in the sky sentimentality, right? Opiate of the masses, this great hope that's not going to come about. But Hebrews 11 says, no. It's not if you're just hoping in heaven, then you're not going to be any earthly good. It's the people who hope in heaven, who have an ultimate destination, who can see the future, even though they can't see the future. They're the ones that actually make the most difference. Abraham does what is right. He's faithful because he's focused on something else. Where do you get the strength to speak out against injustice? In the government, or in the family, or at work? Where do you get the strength? It's because you're looking towards something else. You know the way things are supposed to be, so you can do that. Where do you get the strength to hold on when the circumstances are beating you up? You know the way things are supposed to be. You're not holding on here. How are you going to stand up when you're losing over and over again? How are you going to be crazy generous? How are you going to choose compassion? How are you going to love people that really are hard to love? It's because you know what's coming. It's not I'm just going to hope there and just be. No. It's we're moving into that world. We're going forward in hope. If you've got billions of dollars in the bank, right? A few of you, I think, do, right? If you've got billions of dollars in the bank and somebody pickpockets you for $100, you're going to be like, well, that wasn't fair, right? I mean, you recognize the injustice in that, but you're probably going to sleep okay, aren't you? I mean, it's not going to mess you up too much. It's $100. I mean, I could say right now, if you lose a dime. If somebody steals a dime off, you'd be like, that was rude, but come on, right? You're not really going to care that much. Because you know what you have. Abraham's saying this. I'm not going to treat my country. I'm not going to treat my family. I'm not going to treat my culture or my ethnicity or my money or my success or my career. I'm not going to treat them. I'm not going to put the pressure on them that would come if I say, these things are my life. This is how I am. This is who I am. This is my identity. I'm not going to put that kind of weight on these things. Like this is my whole wad. This is everything. Because if you got the $100, right, and that's everything to you, then your life is ruined. He says, I'm not going to put that on it. City parks. Tim Keller, I got a lot of this great stuff from Tim Keller. Tim Keller talks about city parks. He says, city parks are wonderful things, aren't they? You ever been just like relaxed, throwing the frisbee with the dog or kids or whatever, husband or wife, I don't know, throwing frisbee, right? They're wonderful. You walk and you see the birds and you just kind of hang out on the blanket, and, right? But what happens when the city park is supposed to hold the weight of your entire identity, of everything you are? What happens when people start to live in city parks? They get pretty wretched, don't they? They get kind of disgusting. You've probably been to some parks where there's just hundreds of people who just live in them. It's a very different place. Because they're not meant to hold that much weight. They're not for that reason. Abraham knew the same thing is true of his life. He says, you know what? As long as I understand this life is a park, it's a beautiful park, a place I can enjoy. It's great, but it's not my home. It's not where I live. Money's great. Marriage, great. Children, great. Work, great. Politics, great. Culture is great. It's just not home. If I try to make this bear the whole weight of all of my life, I'm going to ruin it. So I won't. I'm going to look ahead to another country. Someone stole the $100 from me, but it's not my. I don't put all my identity there. I got $1 billion. The final principle is this, goes one step further, and we've already started down this path. It's not merely not trusting in our circumstances. It's not merely moving forward in hope. It's putting our hope in someone. Look at verse 11. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age, and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father. Why? Because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. He considered him faithful who had made the promise. He's not hoping in hope. He's not having faith in his faith. So many people think, well, if you're sincere about it, then that counts as your faith. Just your sincerity alone, that's good enough. It doesn't matter what you believe in. It just matters that you really believe. But that's not at all what faith means here. When he says, by faith, those first two words that show up in every single section here, by faith. It's never about faith. It's about what the faith is put in. It's by faith in him who is faithful. Abraham didn't look at his faith. He was looking through his faith to God. Right? Like if your windshield is disgusting, right? It's one thing to be able to see the windshield. You're like, okay, good, I can see the windshield. But that's not good enough, is it? You don't want to see the windshield. You want to be able to see through the windshield to the object that you don't want to hit, right? Or that you want to stay on the path towards. We want to use our faith to get us where we're going, but it's only with faith in the object through the windshield. You know what I love 60s music. Greg and I sometimes work out to 80s music most of the time, but sometimes to 60s music. But I love the 60s music. You know, that feeling, that flower child. All you need is love. All you need is love. I don't even know who does that. Is Steve here? But Beatles? Oh, it's the Beatles? Okay, sure. I'm embarrassed. All right, so I don't know most of who does them, but I've heard them, right? All you need is love. I know, I'm embarrassed now. Okay, so everyone knew at that time that this is really it. Like, love really is all you need. They got something, I think. They began to grasp, right? It didn't matter whether they were living in poverty, they were living in a treehouse, they were living on the lawn. It didn't matter. As long as they had love, everything was good. It was the love generation, and they grasped this. They understood that love is indeed an anchor for our soul. They get that, and they're mostly right. Because if you're with someone you love and circumstances are biting you in the behind, right, it's easier to make it through, isn't it? You're like, okay, it doesn't matter what the storm is because we're here, we're in the tent together, everything's okay. And there's a lot to that. And that's really helpful. When the waves come, when the winds blow, your anchor holds if you've got somebody close to you. And that's a beautiful, happy thing. The problem is that there are sometimes winds that blow that are too strong for that kind of an anchor. So that spouse or that boyfriend or girlfriend or that child or whatever it is that holds you strong is not quite enough. And it wasn't meant to be. It's supposed to be a picture of something else. It's supposed to be just a hint. When you look into your spouse's loving eyes and you're just looking in that, you're supposed to be seeing something different. It's okay. You can be romantic and do all that stuff. I'm not saying don't do any of that stuff. Love your spouse. Fantastic. But they are a picture of the anchor that will hold through every storm. Chapter 6 of Hebrews, God confirms with an oath, swearing, remember who he swears on? On himself. Why? Because there's nothing greater to swear by. It's like I could swear by my mom. Nope, can't do that. I could swear by the king. I am a bigger king. I can't, right? He has to swear by himself. He confirms with an oath so that we who have fled to take hold of the hope might be greatly encouraged. This is all Hebrews 6. And we have this as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. This. And he's going to go on to explain in the next chapters that it's Jesus, this great high priest. So he may say it like this. Yeah, the anchor for your soul is love. That's good. Love is all you need, but it's a love so much more powerful than you can possibly imagine. It's not love like you understand it here. It's the love of God. It's not about faith. It's not about love. It's about faith in Him. It's about love of Him. How does Abraham see through the windshield? How does he have this faith? He knows the one who is faithful. See, it's about our faith, but it's only about our faith as we recognize that He is the one who is faithful. Did Abraham doubt? Yeah, I think he did. I mean, we don't get a lot of that in Hebrews 11, but I think he didn't trust God always. I've read the Genesis text. They're not quite as affirming as the Hebrews seems to play it out. There's a lot more to the story there. He doubted himself. He knew he couldn't be faithful, right? And we see that. And you know, I hope, that you're not always going to be faithful because those winds come. Circumstances bite us in the behind. That's why I think God in Genesis 15 goes through those animals that are split apart, and He goes through it on His own. Because He knows that Abraham's not going to be able to uphold his side of the deal. Not every time. He's going to doubt a lot. He's going to not be faithful. So God says, all right, I'll be faithful. I'll be faithful 100% of the time. I'm going to love you through your shame and through your hurt and through your discouragement. I'm going to be an anchor. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to keep loving no matter what. God says by walking through those animals, I am the one. I'll take care of this. I am faithful. I know you're going to suffer. I'm not going to let you go. And in fact, if I let you go, that's the whole point of those animals being cut. I'm going to cut myself off. It's like a death wish on Himself. That's a powerful covenant to make. I will stand with you. I will make this relationship work at all costs. Even when you fail, I will succeed. I will be faithful. And I know every one of you needs to hear this. That He will be 100% faithful. He will follow through with His promises. And you know that that's true because you know what it cost Him to make this happen. As Jesus hangs on that cross, God loses Him. God said, I know the world stinks. I know Macduff is correct. I know Mel Brooks is correct. They get it. And there's going to be a million reasons in your life for you to lose faith and to lose hope, and a million reasons for you to stop moving forward and become cynical and stoic and hopeless. There are those things. If you haven't hit them yet, they're coming. That's when you are feeling like that, when you're feeling like, I cannot make it, that's when Jesus doesn't lose hope and continues to move forward for you. That's how God has proved himself to be faithful, through Jesus. When you're wondering if all the stuff's going to turn out, remember he's the anchor for your soul. Remember the one who suffered humiliation, who suffered death for you. Remember the one who's been faithful to Abel and Enoch and Noah and now Abraham and hundreds and thousands of more people throughout history. We look to something greater. We look to being in God's presence forever, full time. We remember that he's faithful, and you haven't done anything that will keep him away from that. So he'll say to you again, will you come again? Will you realize that I am faithful? Will you throw yourself and all the other stuff that you think makes you who you are, will you throw it down in front of him and rest in him? Even with your doubts, even with your hurts, in fact, especially with them. Will you come? Will you respond to him? You know, this second half of our service, it's not a half, it's a very small part, but is us responding. He's spoken to us. He's given us his body and his blood. He's spoken to us and he said, don't trust your circumstances. Go in hope of the one who is faithful. He's given us those calls today. He's spoken to us. Now, how do you respond to him? Christian, non-Christian, somebody on the fence, if there is such a thing? How do you respond? We're going to respond in a few different ways, but there's a multitude of ways for you to respond. Here's the first way. We're going to pray. I'm going to be silent. It's just going to be silence for a moment. That's where you talk with God. That's where you say, I want to be faithful because you're faithful. It's where you say, I've messed up, but I love you. It's where you come back to him or come to him for the first time, or reconfirm your commitment to him. So I'm going to be quiet, and then I'm going to pray, and then we're going to stand and we're going to sing. Let's just be quiet for a moment. Thank you for the cross. Thank you, Jesus, for taking our humiliation, our guilt, our sin on yourself. Thank you for loving us and not letting anything get in the way of your love. Thank you for being faithful to us every day. And we cry out to you, Lord, will you give us patience? Will you give us faith even though it doesn't seem like the promises of the past are fully coming true? Lord, help us to fix our eyes on Jesus, who is coming again. He is perfecting our faith, and he's coming again. Help us to see that day all the more clearly as the day comes closer and closer. That moment when we can be with you forever, and all will be made right, and justice will reign supreme. Thank you for your promise. And we reconfirm now that we are trusting in that promise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.